I will tell you, we're about a week through NFL free agency, really that first wave, if you will. And as a result, I thought it was a good time to come back and give you another updated 2023 NFL mock draft. I've been a little surprised that the burst of activity you saw with the first day and a half of free agency was about what you would expect. But after that, the market petered out really quickly. And maybe this is coming from a slightly biased Bears fan standpoint, to be fair, of expecting the Bears to be a little more active and spend a little more money in free agency than what they ultimately did. But it doesn't just feel like that with the Bears. It just feels like the market in general has been a little soft. And it was a weaker free agent class, I'll grant you. But yeah, I have been a little bit surprised for sure. But it is important now that free agency is underway and you've seen a bunch of player movement, teams signing new players, other players leaving, trades, what have you, to rethink kind of the draft philosophy and the draft strategy. Because when you think about NFL teams, you think about the NFL draft, you could put all that teams draft the best of player available shit. You can put that in the fucking toilet. Because that's just fundamentally not true. Complete hogwash. Even if they say that they draft best player available, no, they don't. That's a lie. The vast majority, if not all NFL teams, especially at the top of the draft, are drafting best available player at a position of need and weighing talent versus need, and to pretend like they don't is just disingenuous. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about NFL teams. When they said they're talking about, it was the best player available. It was the best player available at a position of need. Cut the bullshit. Let's be honest about it. Because if you sat there and said it truly was about best player available, then a team that took a quarterback one year would come back and take a quarterback the next year if that quarterback was the best player on the board. Of course, we know that doesn't make any fucking sense, especially the quarterback you took the year before. It looks like he could be the dude. You wouldn't fucking do that, right? And when you talk about similarly ranked talents, you've got player A, let's say on the defensive line, and he's a little bit above player B, who's a corner. But you also realize that this guy here, this defensive lineman you project to be a 4-3 defensive end, an edge rusher, you've already got two young edge rushers that are under contract for the next several years. You're picking in the top 5 or 10. Do you take this guy who might not even be on the field the majority of your defensive snaps, or do you take the guy at corner who instantly is the best corner on your team from day one? It's not a hard fucking decision, in my humble opinion. And it's not a hard decision. It's also what most NFL teams do when they're drafting. Well, sometimes there's always that squirrely shit, the stupid stuff, but that's what you expect out of the NFL teams. So yeah, with that said, it doesn't perfectly line up. Even when I'm looking at this mock draft, I'm looking at the pick for Detroit at 6. If I had to do this again, I certainly would probably change it. But it is what it is, because you never know. But that could also be representative of a player going in a certain spot, not necessarily to that team. Hard to know, though, right? Hard to know. Because sometimes teams will do dumb things. We see it every year. We absolutely do. And sometimes we forget just how many teams are really, really bad at the draft. Really bad. If you said most years a team got 3 of their 7 picks right, you'd feel pretty good about their draft, especially if they laid a couple of those drafts successively, right? That's not very good. It really isn't. Looking at this draft, there's probably not a ton of super notable things here. Maybe one is that I'm projecting Tyree Wilson at 3 to Arizona over Will Anderson, who I've got going 5 to Seattle. That's as much thinking about systemic fit as it is anything else. This time you'll notice I bumped Anthony Richardson down to the QB3 slot. Again, just giving a different look. CJ Stroud at pick 1 to Carolina, though. I got to be honest, I ask those of you that are watching this, if I look at CJ Stroud and I look at Bryce Young, you have to tell me, from a physical standpoint, I'm not even just talking about height. I'm just talking about, physical skills. how does Bryce Young rank better than C.J. Stroud? Now, some of you might say mobility and the athleticism. Okay, I'll grant you that. But in terms of actual pocket passing, it's not close. Arm strength, Stroud's arm is much better. I'd argue his accuracy and his ball placement are also better. I don't get it right now, but hey, whatever. But I wanted to talk about Jalen Carter because this is going to be a polarizing prospect when we get to the draft next month. And, I was looking at this exercise and I'm saying to myself, Jalen Carter could go top 5. Jalen Carter could go on day 2. The range is that large. If teams do more research and they really find out they really don't like what they see, Jalen Carter could go day 3. Who the hell knows? And I'll tell you personally, I felt like he was a tad bit overrated as a prospect because for a guy to be so highly thought of and highly rated, he sure had a number of flaws in his game and had far too many instances where you really didn't see anything out of him at Georgia. It's just my opinion. But I was really having trouble figuring out where to slot Jalen Carter in this mock draft. There was a thought there, and I was looking and saying, the Bears at 9, would they take that chance? They very well might. But then I was looking at, at the end of the day, you got to be able to protect Justin Fields, so maybe that bias came in, fair or not. So I had them take a Paris Johnson Jr., the offensive tackle from Ohio State. And I was trying to figure out, where else Jalen Carter could go. And the team, the fit that made the most sense to me was Philadelphia, the Eagles at 10. He could go there on the defending, NFC champions and play alongside teammates like Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean. He could sit there and learn and be mentored by Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, Hassan Reddick. That's a pretty good situation. He could come in and be a guy that plays a role initially versus having to have the pressure of being the guy for an entire defense. Yeah, that would be a really, really good spot for him. And also when you think about the Eagles, hey, you just lost Javon Hargrave in free agency. Fletcher Cox isn't getting any younger. Brandon Graham isn't getting any younger. Part of the key to success for the Eagles in 2022 was their strength in the trenches on both sides of the ball. You continue to invest in that strength. And this would be a reflection of that. So I'll be really curious to see where his draft stock ends up taking him. But I think the range could be quite large. In terms of other things that stand out here as I kind of look over my mock, there's obviously the question about what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets and the Packers in terms of that potential trade. And I'll say this, if I'm the Packers, I'm not doing that deal without a guarantee of a 2023 first-round pick and at minimum a 2024 second-round pick that could vest into a first-round pick based off of playing time incentives and performance thresholds and so forth. If the Jets think that Aaron Rodgers is that good, you absolutely hold out for a first-round pick if you're the Packers. I think they'd be insane not to. We'll see what happens there, and they may end up having to take a little less, and you might have to live with that. Other than that, I don't, so there's some player movement and so forth. I'll be really curious to see how the running back position goes. You're seeing a number of conversations about Bijan Robinson going somewhere in the top half of round 1. And I'm sure there are going to be teams that will view him very highly. I don't know that he's my running back 1. I don't feel that way right now. But balance of a question of, how high do you draft a running back? Should you really be taking a running back in round 1? But if you're a team that really struggles in the running game and this guy could be a 3-down back and a difference maker for you, he might pay off more immediately for you than other offensive players you might take. It's an interesting decision and interesting conversation there. So, anyways, long story short, that's my mock draft. It's in the description box. I only did 1 round this time. Sorry if you wanted more out of me. I was trying to throw this together in a hurry. I'll come back in another week and a half or 2 and put out maybe a 2 or even 3 round mock draft. We'll see. Side note, starting Wednesday, you'll start getting my quarterback scouting reports. They're coming, folks. They're coming. Working on them now. I'm excited. I hope you are too. All right, I'm out.